Good morning or evening for everybody, depending on where you're at in the world. I know it's 8:30 a.m. for me, and it's 6 or 6:30 for Mancudas. So
Yeah,
I know it's the end of your Friday, and you're probably looking forward to your weekend. But thank you for
yeah.
coming on another episode of This Is Tech Talks. How'd your Friday go?
Uh, at the company, our Fridays is usually, R&D time, so they are quite flexible and quite fun. So I am in a full Friday mood right now, So we'll see
Awesome.
how the chat will go.
I do love R&D time. That's for sure. That's awesome. Cool. So, do you want to just give a little bit of introduction about yourself? What do you do? What are we going to be talking about today? A little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ingridas. I'm a software engineer from Lithuania. Currently, I am a mobile tech lead at our local startup Below. And here I'm responsible for mobile app, and this app is implemented using Flutter. And under the Flutter, there is Dart, and Dart is the topic that we'll be going to talk about today.
Awesome. Great. Cool. So, what is Dart? I know I'm not super experienced in really much other than JavaScript, TypeScript kind of thing for web development. Haven't really done any cross-platform development or mobile for the most part. So just give a little brief overview of what Dart is, what's it used for, and what you use it for.
Yeah. So fundamentally, Dart is just another programming language. As we know, there are a lot of those.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, fair. But so Dart is a programming language developed by Google. I think Dart is mostly known because it's the programming language living under the Flutter. Flutter is framework built on top of Dart. So usually people come to Flutter and then they learn Dart as usual. But
Gotcha.
Dart could be also used as a standalone programming language. As a language, that's an object-oriented programming language. So if you personally, I came to Flutter from the C# background, so coming to Dart was not a headache at all. I mean, the syntax is very similar. Of course, that could be the same for Java developers, I would say. So object-oriented programming language. It has some, I read some articles, I was a little bit preparing for this talk, and I read some fun articles, and some people say Dart should be like a killer for JavaScript or something like that. So there are some fun titles around. So Dart actually has some similarities with JavaScript, how Dart works in general, because Dart is a single-threaded programming language, meaning everything is working under a single thread, but there's an event loop, that handles all the operations that is happening over there. And that's the similarity with JavaScript. If you need, if you have those fancy computers nowadays that has multiple cores, you can use those as well in Dart by creating another isolate. That's isolate is, we could talk about this a little bit later, but isolate is, you could basically think of that as a thread, something like that. So yeah, general purpose programming language, so OP, type safe programming language, which is great, especially if you're a web developer. Yeah, I think that could be a short introduction to this, and now we can, expand a little bit on whatever.
Cool. Yeah. So you mentioned Flutter. So Flutter is the framework, and you use Dart to write Flutter.
Yes. So Dart is a programming language, and Flutter is a UI framework. And actually, as Dart, even in their main page, they state that Dart is a programming language meant to build user interfaces or create client applications. So actually, all the garbage collector that's working under the hood for Dart, everything, all the developer experience that Dart brings to you, it's actually really helps you, building UIs and building everything that's around that.
Cool. Yeah, I've never really looked into Flutter, but I've heard lots and lots and lots of people talk about it. I feel like we've had someone on the show, or not recently necessarily, but someone at some point talking about Flutter.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you choose Dart over say something else? Like you mentioned that you could use Dart as a standalone, or you could use it with a framework. But like, why would someone choose it, right? Other than it being a JavaScript killer.
Yeah. Fair point. So first of all, as I mentioned, if you want to use Flutter to build your applications, obviously you have to, pick Dart because that's the language that you'll code in when using Flutter. I think the main goal of Dart and the Flutter and all the ecosystem that Google brings with those technologies, that by learning a single language, you could build cross-platform apps. And now, again, Flutter supports 6 stable platforms. So that's Android, iOS, web, Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. And, you can code everything for all of those platforms using Dart programming language. So that's an obvious benefit, especially if you imagine being a company or being a startup, and you just fundamentally need a smaller developer team because it's enough to know a single language, and this team can scale to other platforms. So yeah, that's a benefit. Of course, Dart is not dedicated. Maybe it's dedicated to build those UIs and build those client applications, but also now it's getting more popular, Dart as a backend. So now you could learn Dart and you could go full stack with that. You can build, you can use that to deploy, to build like something like Cloud Functions running in the back. You can build like web servers using Dart and also corresponding frameworks on top of that. So actually, by learning a single language, you could get a full stack developer and build the whole application, the whole system using that. So that's also an obvious benefit, considering that, for instance, of course, with JavaScript you could do the same. Technically, you could use React and then Node.js in the back, and that's again JavaScript, for the full stack. But that's a preference, I think.
Cool. Yeah. I'm just Googling around for some backend server frameworks right now. It looks like there's some. I'm looking at aqueduct.io. Looks interesting. It looks pretty similar to like, say, something like Nest.js. With how it looks like kind of has. Does Dart have decorators, or is it just more like bind functions? Is that a Dart feature?
By decorators,
I guess
what do you mean?
Do you write JavaScript or TypeScript code very much, or at all?
I used to write that, yes,
Okay.
but that was before coming to Dart. So meaning,
Okay, well, decorators are new,
recently.
so yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So, hey, Deep, how's it going?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, sorry for the delay. I having issue
No
with
worries.
internet connection.
No worries, no worries.
The
Yeah.
party has just started. So
Yeah. So, what are some of the unique features of Dart? Like, why would someone choose it? Like, say you have a problem that could be solved by Dart versus something else.
yeah.
Why would you use Dart?
Cool. So I think I don't know if that you could call that a feature, but what's kind of strange about Dart is that you are using object-oriented programming language to build UI. You do not have any template language or like as having HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You code everything in Dart, and UI is just there. You're building UI in front of you. That's mind-blowing actually when you start coding in Dart, because you're not used to that. About the language itself, I think one of the unique features, not unique comparing to Swift programming language, but Dart has sound null safety, meaning if you define a type for a variable that it shouldn't be null, it will never be. I mean, there's no such thing as runtime null pointer exceptions, the $1 billion idea that someone introduced there. So yeah, if you define that something won't be null, it won't be ever, because this will be handled during the compilation of your program. So that's actually brings a lot of benefits to your code base. As I mentioned, Dart is single-threaded. It's running in isolate. So isolate, as I mentioned, you could consider this as a thread. So basically, isolate is a scoped group. yeah, it's just a thread that has a dedicated memory, has a dedicated heap, and so on. And everything is running there using the event loop. So it's basically the same as JavaScript. So with the first in, first out methodology. So if the command goes first, it will be produced, first, and so on. And if you need like a very expensive synchronous operation to execute in your program, maybe you're calculating the 1000th member of Fibonacci. Maybe that's what we all do each day. So you can spawn another isolate. So there would be two isolates running in parallel, and these isolates do not share memory, which is something unique because when I think about concurrent programming, parallel programming, usually the memory could be shared, and then you get into the position when you need to use locks and other parallel programming headaches. But in Dart, it's not happening. Isolates have their dedicated memory space, their dedicated heap. Garbage collector is also executing their dedicated event loops. They are separate, and yeah, you just calculate, and then you just basically, if you spawn another isolate, there's a result. You bring that back to your main thread, main isolate, and then you continue your work. So basically, yeah, that's something unique, and also you see the benefit of that when building UIs because we all want smooth UIs. We want them fluent, 60 FPS at least. So if you have an event loop that does not block your main UI thread, everything is rendering, especially in Flutter, when you need to execute those little operations asynchronously, it's really important, and you see a lot of benefits of that. And the main thing about that is that you shouldn't take care of that by yourself. Everything is run by Dart, by the compilator, by the engine. So you are just coding the fun part, I would say.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, it sounds like you can run like isolates. You can run as many isolates in parallel theoretically as your resources would allow you. Like you just spin up
I
an
think
isolate.
yes. Yeah, I haven't stress tested that, but if you have enough cores, definitely can spawn several of those. And actually, isolates, it's also they are not meant to be as a long running processes, as like a background job. Usually, if you need to execute something expensive, you spawn an isolate, and actually that's the function name that does that. You spawn it, it executes something, and it brings the result, and it's that it just gets killed, and you spawn another one if you want to.
Yeah, I believe C# has something similar with its like task runner. You can like kind of spin off a task and it'll run it, and it'll spin up a separate thread, run it, and then return the result back to your main thread. And I believe that the V8 Chrome's V8 node, or I guess it's the Node.js engine, it also uses isolates, but I'm not sure if they're the exact same concept or if they're just similar in some respect.
No idea. My initial reaction is that shouldn't be the same thing, but I may be wrong at so many levels there, so I don't want to expand.
Well, V8's a little complicated, so I definitely do not blame you. I've listened to podcasts about people talking about isolates before and figured maybe it was the same thing.
Okay.
So we talked about this a little bit, but with Dart, it sounds like you can deploy to any platform, right? You can build for any platform. Is that built into the language and all the tooling? So I could just Dart build for Mac and Dart build for, iOS, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so that's what Flutter handles. So if yeah, so as I mentioned, I don't know if Deep was already joined, but there are 6 stable platforms, meaning that you could 6 official platforms, let's say, that you can build the Flutter code. So that's another advantage of Dart actually, and of Flutter in general, is that it compiles your code to machine code, meaning it's for instance, if you're taking React Native and you're also building cross-platform apps there, so you have your JavaScript code, you have your native code. Let's say you need to, show a page from Android or iOS, right? And there's this bridge in between that translates your JavaScript commands to the native layer. And if you imagine there's an animation that runs like 60 frames per second, means that this command should be 60 times per second, transcribed from that bridge. And the main advantage, I would say, in Flutter is that there's no bridge. The code compiles to machine code, to ARM code. So it's technically native code. You could say that. It's not exactly the same, but in documentation you could find that it's rendered into it's compiled into native code, and actually the same happening for web, because Dart has a feature of being compiled to JavaScript. So you're writing Dart code, but you compile that to JavaScript, and that's again kind of native code, right, on web. So that's the main benefit, I would say, of Dart and Flutter. So this is basically the closest you get to the native performance without coding in native, I would say.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we talked about this cross-platform things, right? So is there any package manager things like npm
Yes,
for
and
Dart?
Dart has a dedicated product manager. So basically, Dart SDK brings its own package manager that's called Pub. So in Pub, you are playing darts. That's basically how you can remember all of that. So yeah, so Pub is basically the same as npm. It's not that big still, and I think it will never be, because you can find anything in npm.
Yeah.
But I think it's the same for Pub. I mean,
Okay.
quite recently I saw someone uploaded a movie to Pub. Just not very legal action to do, but it was there. Yeah, it got removed pretty fast. But yeah, there's this Pub package manager, and it helps.
Cool.
That's
I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm sure you've heard of some of the wild stories from the npm ecosystem, like the LPAD and people taking npm packages down and crashing the whole internet and stuff like that. Has there already been any wild stories like that with Pub before, with like people just like
I
destroying
haven't.
packages and causing chaos?
No, I haven't heard that. I mean,
Okay.
there could be some notorious ones like, oh, do not use that because of X and Y, but it's not because of some flaw in the security or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I was just curious because npm there's been some crazy things happen with that package manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. So compilation, cross-platform, it's all built into, well, I guess it's Flutter, not necessarily Dart, right? Dart's just the language we
Yeah.
use. Flutter compiles all
Yep.
that. Does Flutter bring anything specific in terms of like distribution, or do you just use all the same distribution channels as you normally do with
Yeah, that's the point.
App Store stuff?
Since you built the native code, so if you want your app to to be run on Android, you just build the APK or AB file, and then you just distribute it in any way you like. And that's the same for iOS. On web, you can get the result in two ways actually. One of those, as I mentioned, Dart could be compiled to JavaScript. So one of the ways to compile that is to just compile the basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That JavaScript is also includes all the engine to run the app, but also there's a possibility to render web as a WebAssembly using this. So that's also could be run for Windows. Executable file for macOS and Linux, the same analogies. So yeah, you get the final output result, and then you can ship it however you want.
Ship it through whatever app store or distribution channel you want. Yeah. So Santos showed up in the chat here. He was just asking about using Dart outside of Flutter. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Some people use Dart for completely different things other than building, UI apps. Santos, we were discussing how there's server frameworks, like API frameworks written in Dart that you can use Dart for.
So basically there are I think even more frameworks are appearing there. to build, the backend services, servers using Dart. Also, you could deploy Dart as a functions to Google Cloud. I think there is Cloud Run. I think that's how it's called. You can put the Dart code there, and it could be executed. There are even code labs created for that, so you can quite inexpensively test that out for yourself. Prototyping, because what Dart has, it has a pretty cool online editor, actually full-blown online editor.
Nice.
I mean, it's quite limited for dependencies. You still cannot, because of the security, I would say, you cannot import everything, but actually you can even build the full Flutter application out there. So it's basically CodePen, but dedicated to the Dart ecosystem. And yeah, just prototyping. I mean, I'm using that like countless of times just to, double check how to implement that generic instead of putting that there in your whole code base of 1 million lines of code, just checking out if that would work in a smaller case. So just prototyping, that's also what's now I'm thinking in Dart, not in JavaScript. So it's just easier and quicker to test that out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really cool. It's awesome that you can use it for all kinds of stuff like that. And there's like the built-in editor, and man, I bet you serverless like Cloud Run functions would just be so quick, written in a more natively compiled. I guess it's natively compiled to machine, not natively compiled to the platform, right? Like you're not compiling Dart to Swift, you're compiling Dart to machine code that is running.
Yeah, to machine code.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, so it's always compiling to native code for the platform rather than for the, like, I don't know, but whatever the layer is above it, right? So Java or Kotlin for Android or Swift for iOS, etc.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
Yeah. Just wanted to clarify that for anybody listening. They're like, oh, I can compile my Dart code to Swift. It's like, it's not really what's happening.
There are transpilers. I mean, you could generate, Flutter code from Figma designs, because that's the thing. And I think you could do something the other way, but the main goal is to get that executable file somewhere and to ship it.
Hey, anything's possible if you spend enough time trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah, actually, one of the most active Flutter community members, Simon Lightfoot, he actually, in one of his recent talks, he on top of Flutter, he's building like 3D engine. I think for one of the talks, he recreated like Resident Evil game, with all the assets, and you can navigate that. So it's cool. I mean, when you have enough time, when you actually able to do that, that's limitless,
Totally. Yeah, 100%. Okay, so do you have any learning resources that we can share to some people watching or listening that might be helpful for them to go about learning Dart, figuring Flutter out, for example?
Yeah. What's also really, really great about Flutter and Dart is that their documentation is the best I've seen by learning any programming language, because these examples, as I mentioned, since there's a Dartpad, the online editor, usually by the documentation there are like executable code examples where you can try anything that's mentioned there. Flutter team is like creating videos every week, and they're putting those videos into the documentation. So if they're introducing something new or something old that it's not that popular, usually there's a video for that. The documentation is very extensive. Of course, what I didn't mention, Dart and Flutter is also open source. So, a lot of contributions, and especially the first contribution from anyone is usually, extending the documentation, improving it, providing more code examples over there. So documentation is the first place where you should go. You can learn a lot of that. I think for Dart, the official page is like dart.dev. And there's like API tours, there's like language tours, of all the language capabilities over there. There's even, I saw that quite recently, there's a complete, very, very long tutorial, Dart for JavaScript developers. So meaning if you know JavaScript, how you can move, fluently to Dart, what are the corresponding syntax changes that you need to get through and so on. So these are also resources. The same resources actually I prepared for Flutter. So it's like Flutter for Kotlin developers, Flutter for Swift developers, Flutter for JavaScript developers, and so on, for React developers. You can actually, there are a lot of those. There's like a lot of free code labs, meaning a lot of, hands-on experience, how you can learn that. So just go to flutter.dev or dart.dev, and there are a lot of resources there. And actually what's fun is that inside these resources, sometimes there are mentioned like active people from the community, because something is not really completed, described in the documentation. They just simply put a link, say, hey, this person explained it really well, so just go there and check that resource. So that's the beauty of open source, I would say.
That's awesome. Yeah, I shared dart.dev and the coming from JS to Dart articles in the chat there. I'm looking at them now, and holy, this is extensive. Wow, there's a lot of information on here.
That was my reaction as well, yes.
Yeah, and it's all official, right? Like it's all written by the Dart community and developers.
Yep.
Holy. Cool.
So, yeah.
That's exciting. I might have to go take a look at the Dart one of these days now. I just started streaming, so maybe I'll do a let's try to figure out Dart as a JS developer stream.
Yeah, how quick you can write a hello world, right?
Yeah, exactly. Void main. I don't know what the print statement is in Dart, but I'll figure it out.
It's print. Spoiler alert.
just like Python. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, we're coming up to the end of the episode. Anything that you want to promote, shout out, share?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. I didn't mention that while introducing, but also I'm a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart technologies. So meaning I post a lot of stuff about Flutter and Dart on my Twitter account, which is visible there by my name. And actually, by following this tag, you could find my Medium articles. And actually, I wrote quite an extensive article series about design patterns in Dart. This is quite extensive. Also, especially if you come to the OOP world quite freshly, and these are quite useful, about good practices in OOP in general, I would say. Articles. I participate in conferences. I give some talks. So just search MKOBodies. You'll find a lot of resources. Additional resources, by getting back to the previous question, but also a lot of fun stuff on Twitter, because I post memes as well, which is also the reason why some people follow me.
Well, I just followed you, so I expect some good memes over the next little while.
Okay, next week I'm bringing those there.
Perfect. Are you still the only GDE in Lithuania?
For Flutter and Dart, yes.
Nice.
I haven't checked the official map for a while. I know maybe someone is there for other technologies. So I need to update this. Need to double check.
Yeah, I just made it onto the map. It takes a while for the map to be updated. So there might be some hidden Lithuanian GDEs there somewhere.
I hope so, because in general the community, because also I'm organizer for Flutter Lithuania now. It's called Flutter Vilnius. So we are getting into the meetup stuff over there, but the community is still rather small. So just knowing that there could be more GDEs or GDGs or whatever GDEs asterisks, then it would help a lot to make those events going.
There's one other
Lithuanian
GDE.
My bio. Okay.
I don't know what one she is though. She is web technologies, not Dart and Flutter. So you're good. I think you're still the only Dart and Flutter Lithuanian GDE.
Nice. Really cool.
Awesome. Deep, do you have anything to add or anything you want to ask before we head out?
Yes. So Santosh have one question. So apart from the GCP, there is any other cloud support for the Flutter, like Azure and AWS?
Yeah, actually, AWS has an amplifier and it supports Dart and Flutter. I don't know at how extensive that is, whether it supports like everything. And it definitely supports authentication, database or data storage. I don't know how it's called properly in the amplifier context, but I have used this 1 year ago, so I think now it should be even more improved. But yeah, so AWS Amplify definitely. Azure, I think there are like you could publish your apps by using Azure. I haven't done that, but I think that's possible. It should be possible. Why not?
Yeah,
But yeah, it's
yeah,
supported.
that's
But
good.
I don't know how extensively. Just
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It was really awesome to learn about Dart. I'm like super hyped about the documentation because that's like the best docs I've ever seen for any
I
language.
think that's the main thing that the listener should bring out of this. Just know that the documentation exists and you should be fine with that.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Cool. Awesome. Well, have a good Friday. I know it's the end of your day. I still have to go through a full day. So
So
jealous.
bad luck you.
Yeah. Thank you,
Okay.
Deep, for joining. It's
Yeah,
good seeing
thank
you.
you.
Yep.
And
Thanks
we will
for inviting
see
me. It was a pleasure.
anytime. We'll have to get you back on here at some point. Maybe Flutter next time or something. We can delve a little bit more into Flutter.
Let's
Yeah,
go.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you.
right.
Have a good
Thank you.
weekend, everyone. We will talk to you soon.
Bye bye.
Yeah, bye everyone.